All right, so welcome to your restorative home practice. I want you to have your bolster propped up on a rolled up blanket, and then there's a quarter fold on top. I'm assuming you can see and hear me well. I didn't ask that before. Let me know if it's good. Okay, so you're going to sit in front. You got a belt that's buckled up in a big-ish loop, connected though. You want it connected. And as you have your blocks beside, so they're distant, so that you won't knock them over any more than they are, you're going to sit in front of the bolster, the short end, and lean your ribs a little bit back so you have this kind of spine extension awareness. So it's like we don't want to round, we're trying to get lifting, which causes the stomach to work. So that's kind of a nice thing about spine extension. But as we land on our hands, be a little cautious that you don't start shoving your bolster back. So you don't want to sit too tight, close to it yet. And then step the feet so they're almost as wide as your mat. And if you're not using a mat, you can just step them wider than hips distance. And let the knees shift side to side. But the key here is on kind of this awkward lift of the ribs, a little bit of this arch. It's a little bit of a workout to let the knees shift side to side. And you're working towards kind of massaging into your hip. Okay, so it's glute rock work, glute rocking. Hopefully your glutes aren't complete rocks, but they likely feel like they're, tension when you roll over them. But once you move, your feet are not pointing or they're not flexing, they're just feet at the end of the leg, not doing anything specific, but rolling through them side to side. And then once you get kind of bored of this positioning, continuation motion, just find a way to come in towards the stillness of center. And then working your belt, take it overhead. We're going to go into boat, so don't lie back yet. You do need it pretty loose, don't we? Okay, gotta stay with my programming. And then the belt goes under your feet. Lift up the belt so it's underneath your arms. So you kind of feel like it's moving your shoulders to balance. Let's pretend it does. And then when you feel the knees bending, work with that lift of the legs with curiosity. So they're not necessarily moving to straight, but you're curious about the force of the feet into the belt and that essential awareness of the shoulders back. If you don't know if they're back or not, you can move them forward and then feel that shrugging sensation in the upper bones. And then the arms could be relaxing. They could be helping you out by holding the legs or the belt. Sometimes I find that curious, but maybe just simply experience the belt and sometimes the wariness of the legs, trying to attempt this semi-awkward position. Daily habit is not to be like this, okay? But it follows a wave of circulation in our legs is what I'm trying to kind of influence in the beginning today. Okay, now bending through, get a feel where you're, close to a right angle. So the knees are bending and you're pushing. The buckle doesn't have to be close to you or could be close to the feet or the hip. It doesn't matter. But feel if you can lean back so you almost anticipate you're trying to arch the spine. But what you're doing is strengthening because you're with resistance with the belt. Your feet add the resistance in front of you. Breathing. Deep breathing is part of strengthening in our ribs and our thoracic spine. Big part of keeping the length in our spine. And then as we bend through the legs further, hold the belt, lower the feet all the way, and then lift the belt up over the knees. Knees are going to move out, open, turning out. Pull the feet closer to the center line, and then tighten the belt down so that the buckle is near your top of your thigh or close to your hip would be better. And then tuck the belt. If your bolster's kind of been sliding around, you might have to, it is such a old school work with our bolster. So you just pull it forward and readjust get your blocks and put your sand on your feet today. So I want you to first be assured that your belt is connected and it's tense enough that there's some demand on the alignment. You know, the belt's around the ankles, the front of the ankle. And then as I put my sand on my feet, across, and then as you lower back, you'll feel the spine. And you know, you might not feel your spine because there's not a lot of nerves there, but when you lower back, this might be an easier way to feel the spine extension. So I'm going to lift my blocks to a higher support for my legs so that my back doesn't feel as much pressure, which doesn't mean it's better if you have the knees lower. We don't want to narrow the SI joint. We want things to be stable. So as you come into the shape, please see if you can move your arms open, and maybe some of us can reach around for our elbows. If this is out of your repertoire right now, let your arms be maybe a little bit open, hovering over the ground, or maybe you need to have them on the floor. But explore the chest circulation, okay? So for some of us, it will be, even foam blocks can dig into your leg a little bit, huh? If they were these the squishy ball, if I had two the same exact, that would be perfect for this pose, huh? You can work with that too. Hold the elbows or the arms are flowing open and close your eyes. And sense the movement of the breath, expanding at the belly and relaxing the abdomen back towards the spine. If you're crossing at the arms, change the crossing, but continue that circulation awareness through the arms into the shoulders. Starting to move through awareness of hips, lower back, rib cage. Let the arms flow down. So all of us have the arms by the sides and they're resting on the ground space. So the shoulders, how they just easily motion. And they're motioning backwards. So as you sense the breath, if on occasion you pull the motion of inhale and you experience tension, your work is on in-breath is, it's part tension, isn't it? Because you have to pull energy in, but at the same time, I'm trying to encourage you to let the belly body, or maybe it's belly brain, relax. And then as you exhale, the belly goes towards the spine. So with that alternating experience, feel the width through the chest. And just accepting what you have with breathing, with circulation, or your range of motion right now. Now you want to release the belt connection, not necessarily slide it away yet, but if you can get to the buckle part, you're going to release that, snap it away, unsnap. And as you move the shoulders back, right, so come back to the previous shape of surrendering, opening the chest. Do you notice any difference if the belt's not entirely snug? You might feel the part that you release, that side is a little less snug. It could be obvious. Because we're going to work into our right hip, and that's going to be obvious when we move along here. So shift the blocks aside. If you've got a ball nearby, I want you to get a hold of that and then slide the feet to about a little wider than hips distance and moving the belt away from the surrounding of the leg circulation. So you might push the sand downward so it's not, intentionally touching your feet, but feel where there's a fairly respectful arch in the spine, especially your lumbar, right? That's where you have where you want to work with your arch. So there's less compression, right, in the vertebrae, even though sometimes mentally it seems like it would be more. That's kind of my challenge, but it's not, right? So that's how we expand in the spine. So when you push into your left foot, I want you to move the right knee a little bit open, and then you'll lift up the right foot and see if you can cross it over the left leg. So I have to slide my left foot down, then I can get that foot to hook. So be honest with that. I mean, it might be something where you move your shoulders, but try to work with the legs to do it. See if you can isolate the legs, do the work. Ball goes next to your upper outer left leg. And then if anything's in the way, move it aside. Bring the left hand to the right knee and then set simply the legs shift down to push into the ball, especially the left upper leg. It tries to smush it. And keep the spine, right, the center piece of the body, very specifically resting back on the bolster. So you're not trying to make any twists with your rib cage or your shoulders. I mean, the hand holds the knee, so that may feel like it's a little bit of twisting, tiny bit, but you're resting on the outside of the left foot. Yeah, so you might be able to gain a little bit more stretch this way. Good, and then feel in your spine. You might feel pretty good right now. Yeah, one thing we're going to work a little more on is when we're on our back, we can do some good movements with the spine or when we're leaning into the body, but we're avoiding things like flexion and twisting, right? So we can do this pattern on our back. So supine is good. Restorative is pretty safe stuff, but there's still some things to be careful of. So when you hold on to that knee, are you feeling something in your right hip? And then get your final kind of impulse here. So this might be that you're moving, your hand is holding and moving the knee a little towards you. I mean, it's micro motion. I know we're not going to see a big lift of your knee over your head, but you feel the pressure, or you're moving the knee towards the left. It's kind of one or the other. I find moving a little towards me is better than pushing it to the left for my, just that whole embodied feeling of strain. It's a little less strain that way for my left leg. As you release the touch on the knee, come back to center. And maybe you're on your back and you do some kind of small reclining marching. Just feel your spine in the natural arch. And now we'll call it the natural march. Okay, getting ready for the next march you're going to go to. All right, so feel when the back muscles are arching and then place the ball over to the right upper outer leg. This might be easier for you to swing the foot over. You've already had some awareness in your body. Your other leg was giving the hint that this was happening. So as you push the ball to the upper outer leg, just let the body weight tilt onto the ball. You see it okay, Floyd? Okay, good. Okay. So reach the right hand to the left knee. And then feel when that weight shifts over, right? It might not be a lot of weight, actually. It's probably more the leg into the hip, and that circulation, gets a little bit more enhanced in your hip. I'm practicing today with my arm down just because I'm wanting to see if it gives more definition into my hip. Otherwise, this kind of changes my flow of awareness, but you could do that. You could let your left arm stretch back too. Okay, so we're wanting to work on improving, right, that resistance in the hip, so bones, right? So this is how we do that with this class. instead of getting some weights, right? We're resistance. So it's nice to have both of those things in your life, probably. Okay, so get a feel of that. My spine feels really pretty safe. I've got the bolster supporting me. Hopefully you do too. You want to have enough bolster and blankets. If you need more height under your back, you can always add another blanket. I'd rather have you feel comfortable and supported. So if you're feeling stressed in your back, you just add another blanket, probably under your bolster would be better. So it's not making your neck flex more. Okay, so we've done no real rotations yet in our core muscles. So I want you to let go of that knee. And then when you shift the knees back center, uncross, place the ball, or if you don't have one, use a block between the knees. And then get a feel of the angle of the legs. Slide the feet a little forward. You might even touch on your sandbag there, which is actually perfect. If I can scoot my toes into that, it will help me get up. But as my motion is here, kind of a little bit robot arms, I want you to reach them back. They don't have to be straight. They can be very bent. And then as you move your arms forward, I want you to feel if you can squeeze the ball and then lift up. So see if you can identify with squeezing and lifting. And then go ahead and come back down on the bolster and take a moment when your arms, they could be kind of anywhere in the set right now, but squeeze into the ball, squeeze so there's resistance. Okay, now try just having the ball, no squeezing. Okay, feel when you move your arms now forward. If you try to lift up, don't give it too much effort. It's a little different than when you squeeze the ball. Okay, so I want you to go back to squeezing into the ball, squeeze, squeeze, and then come up and reach for the knees. And then when you come up to, you're kind of on the tailbone space, want to be a little careful here in the spine, right? We're not interested in a bunch of flexion, even in this shape. So we got to be cautious. So when we hold, can you squeeze into the ball? I stopped squeezing for some reason. Bring your arms forward from the shoulders. Squeeze. It's easy to stop pushing into the ball. Okay, my muscle memory needs to get back in there. So squeeze, squeeze, squeeze until your hip flexors are wheezing. They're tired. Hip flexors are not happy. So squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And then remove the ball. Keep it nearby. Go back to that glute rock, knees side to side. Your feet don't have to be very far apart right now. Just let the movement happen. The knees may need them to be farther apart. Okay, and then we're going to take a full turn. So restorative twist. You're going to shift to your left hip and you'll keep it simple. You'll just rotate and rest your head on your blanket. So you're on the bolster. This is kind of casual, but restorative twist. So my left foot is touching my right. Well, it's not quite the top of the thigh. It's just however the shape of the right leg is. So you can see a little easier, is supported. And I'm trying to rotate through my thoracic vertebrae. Well, it's only going to be the one that does the work. So let your head relax, your eyes rest, and feel just the perspective of the weight this direction into the bolster. You know, analyzing it is not helpful here. Just let the body weight take a mild twist, right? Massaging into the core organs. And you might feel a little bit of intra-abdominal pressure just to be in the shape. You feel the shoulders releasing. Now we're going to shift into our side sage, but I want you to just kind of respect what this pose has begun. Well, I don't know if that's proper language territory there, but how this pose kind of begins this rib motions. Okay, so as I push into my hands to lift up, just pull the bolster out from the blankets, turn it, and set up so the bottom blanket is no longer rolled up. Yeah, it'd probably be okay if it was. You just might not feel very centered on it. Probably some of you could play with that and see if it does work. But we're going to use maybe the sandbag, and some of us like the ball on the inside of the right leg. It's not required, right? None of this, the ball's not like a main ingredient in general. The bolster is the biggest one probably. So if you don't have one, you could use a block. You might need something under the inside of that knee. And if you get the sand, I would start with it before you kind of lower down. So you have at least some of that equipment on your side. But notice this is a turn too, but it's not a flexion and turn. So we're really working on keeping that muscular midsection, defining the core muscles. So they might get kind of tired and labored just because we're avoiding rounding the back before we twist, right? So I want you to keep this emphasis on the mid body. And then take that support, whether your arm is overhead on a block, maybe it's open, maybe it's resting on the side, or it's down on the bolster. So sense the circulation here through the side body. And feel the inhale and that expansion. Right? If the block is overhead, you might need to have it pretty high up. So sometimes when it's too low, it will require you to push a little further in the shoulder, which might be strain. We're not interested in a lot of strain here. So if this is a strain for the shoulder, what does that mean, right? Does it feel like it's beyond pressure and all your mind space is on the shoulder? Then you would move it somewhere else. And you'll be able to accommodate that. So let's emphasize the breathing. Take a few moments here with the body weight into the left hip. Your head might not turn like this direction. You might be nestled on the very side. And you might enjoy that, just letting I kind of like this with my arm down because I'm getting a little bit of stretch in my neck, not too much, and it's not flexing, right? So I'm not rounding it at all, but it's giving some circulation from my trapezius into my neck. Pretty interesting. Okay, so letting your eyes relax is key. Breathing through the ribs. You feel that expansiveness. If your arm is overhead, let's bring the arms so they're all down on the side. And then once the hand is there, even if you've been there for a while, feel if you can actually monitor moving that right shoulder back. Just moving the piece of the arm that's connected to the shoulder just back, away from the neck. Slide the sand away. And then as your right leg draws towards the left leg, who knows what the ball is going to do right now, right? It might be stuck somewhere. But you're going to roll to your back. So this might take a moment here. You might be kind of busy figuring out what to do with the ball, but I would just stay connected, not too much lifting up, sitting upright, but try to roll to the back. And then, this is kind of quite cute. The ball is just stuck between my lower leg bones, and that works just fine. It keeps my impression even. And then as you lower back your head onto the blanket, might be just fine how you have it. You might have to turn it just a little bit so that it is comforting for your neck. I would be fussy about that so you're comfortable. There's no reason you should make this like it's more strained. But really use that upper back position onto the bolster so that you're working with that, the circulation in that upper bones, which can be tense, and then you feel it in the shoulders that are tense. So that it's almost as if you put all the work on your shoulders sometimes with these poses. So let the back musculature into the trapezius, right, upper back sheath, and if it feels kind of like an interesting kind of V shape in the back, right, the trapezius up into the neck, feel if your neck is comfortable enough. So I'm feeling like my head is not quite high enough. So I'm going to roll up my blanket. So I have a nice little tube kind of under my neck. And that's just fine. I can feel the occiput, the center of well, sort of the center, right? The shelf at the back, supported. You could put your sand on your rib cage if you feel like getting the breath, respiratory strength a little bit further. You can work with that. And then let your eyes close for about another 45 seconds here. Yeah, if it's too much with your back muscles, you can always move your feet a little farther apart and then let the knees relax together. So it's like teepee pose. This feels nice. I like this angle for my leg, for my quadricep. It's pretty subtle, but I know that it's helping that area out. Knees pointing inwards. I feel as the inhale goes for about 4 to 5. And then as you relax on the out breath, 5 to 6 counts. And notice if there's any space that you could keep the ribs expanding, right? Without being too, obnoxious about the movement. You want to just feel that it's all subtle, it's all slow and progressive. It's like things take time, right? It's patience for releasing. We don't get as many poses, and that's okay, quality. When we take the knees apart, just enough if your knees were even together, you're going to start to go to side stage. We're going to go backwards on the second side. And I would be kind of, sneaky about it. You want to get into it carefully so that the body isn't lifting and tightening. You want to keep this motion in the ribs continuous. If I sit up, then I'm kind of jerking the spine a bit. So I'm going to work with that fluidity. I might lose some props on the way, like ball or something, but as you roll to the right, all you're going to work with here is getting the blanket in the right spot for you. And then you might have to tilt up a little bit, but if you come up and get the ball set and the sand, just try to stay so that you're still closer to being on your side than versus sitting all the way up. Okay, so try to keep this rotation in the ribs as best as you can. There's no pose police at your house, so you're going to do kind of what you want out of the process here. But, keep in mind, if I keep gripping my neck, I find this is a nice practice to kind of do the work efficiently and respectfully for your bones. So when you have that support on the side, you could reach your left arm. All right, you might decide to have the arm besides you. The bolster on the side of your body. Take a moment to feel that your right hip is set just the supported way. Okay, and your head might be a little bit on the back. You might be all the way on your side of your brain. And center the breath. Inhale and out breath. And even just try to find interest in this waist line, right? How your waistline, your side, has a sensation of length. I love side work, right? It's nice core work. It's also really good for our lower back muscles if they are achy, is to get the side stretches. Okay, so these are really simple minded ones, but as you feel that left arm, whether it's easeful or it's reaching, breathe slow. Exhale completely. And be careful that if the arm is strained and you feel shoulder, neck, compartments tightening, your work is to let the arm be more relaxed. It could happen. You could feel, oh, all of a sudden this really is gripping up in my neck. Then you bring your arm down. This might be the best way for you to do this position. And then we'll keep the motion. So we'll move the sand away and take a turn to your right, on your right hip. So it's not, in some ways it's kind of like you are on the side of the hip and now you're pushing a little into it. Move the blanket away. So you got one blanket on the bottom. Now this one last time was a little more rolled up, right? So I would just kind of turn it so it's tipped up a little higher. You want that height. I mean, if you have a really flat support for a twist, I think it won't fill the gaps here in supporting your ribs. So you want to get very close to your bolster. And it's not that my right hip is next to the bolster. It's actually several inches away from my bolster. But that's because of my hip flexibility. So, I mean, some of you have done pigeon pose where you're trying to get your foot across those things. So it might be easier for you to get your hip right there. But I would rather focus on the ribs lowering down and your head turns towards the knees, right? You don't want your head to rotate and tighten the neck. So we relax the head and your arms. This is kind of cozy. I have my arms resting on the bottom blanket. You could also hug your bolster. This is great for the shoulders. You could bring your arms out. But we do a lot of that in this class. We do a lot of this pattern. So maybe hugging into the bolster could be good for you, just to get your back to feel that releasing and giving it that psychology of surrender. So let's take a few moments in stillness here, centering. Now feel where the weight is into your, well, it's kind of measured, it's almost balanced between your hip and your upper body on the bolster, the hip on the ground, the upper body down. So it's a nice releasing, but when you start to push your hands down, come up, if you've got a block behind your bolster, I want you to grab a hold of that, bring it towards the feet, and then shift your blanket away. Then let's take our bolster towards the side of our mat. It doesn't matter what side for you. I just don't want mine next to my body so you can't see. So you put your bolster on the side and then take a block set. So they're on each side of your mat. And what we'll do is we'll kind of crawl our way into table pose. So we're going to work on some cross connections with posterior, core strength. And it's good to work on the glute strength too, right, for our spine. strength as well. So what we're going to work with is having that balance with the knees on the blanket. If it doesn't feel good with them right on it, you could have them a little bit on the edge if that's better for pressure on your knee bone. Right, so be kind of on the very lip of the blanket. That's just an idea. Some of you have mentioned that works better for you. So hands spreading out through the fingers. This doesn't mean as much as we're used to in cat-cow, but I want you to have the knees in that hips distance, and then toes are under, and get a feel here when you lift up your knees and you're in kind of a puppy pose. So you're not quite in the completely straight leg position. It's a little bending. And then as your head centers down from your spine, let your head nod a little bit side to side. Get a feel of the bending of the knees and that resistance pushing the floor away. Breathe. At least witness one full breath cycle. Okay. If you like to push through, and that feels kind of good in your back muscles, that some people find a kind of a release in the back when they do that. So when you lower down on the knees this time, I want you to bring them together. So they're side by side, the legs are together, maybe not the knees exactly. And let the left leg reach back and feel first, just alternating the leg moving back. Now, a little while ago we did, I think maybe some of you did kind of these little mini marches. It was like moments in the session, but this will be a little bit more drawn out. So when we feel the leg moving back, notice the weight in your arms. Okay, that's just something you have to do. Otherwise you would collapse on your chin, right? You have your arms holding you up. Okay, hopefully I won't collapse on my chin here. But as the right leg goes back, actually let's all end with the right leg moving back, straight back. Stretch the left arm forward. Watch out for the walls in front of you. Although the wall might hold you up. Okay, so stretch the left arm forward. Toes have to really hook under to help you out. And then lower the left hand and the knees together and switch. I wouldn't spend too much energy on the holding it long time, but I want you to now alternate leg back, arm forward, so it's alternating. But see if you can now go with this. So you're going to stretch an arm forward, a leg back. And then once you come down with that position, lift up the knees. The trick is to remember immediately when you come back down, you got to go to the other side. So you're like, this is becoming a little bit of a puzzle for me. It won't be too bad. But when the knee comes down, then you lift up the knees and you stretch the chest. If you do the same side and repeat it, then you'll eventually get to the other side anyway. So focus on the feel of the heel of the hand. I know that's big here. And the lift of the thighs. Okay. And then let's just lower down and stretch the hands a little bit out to the edge of your mat. Turn the fingers out and then lean your hips down to a variation of upward facing dog. But feel if you can have your lift of your head. So you're looking forwards. This is key for the spine. And shrug the shoulders a little bit back and experience where the thighs, the front of the legs, are trying to lengthen. They can only stretch a little further through the quads without the emphasis of pulling the belly, even though the belly's going to move in and find a little bit more length, but I don't want you to try to tug it. And then come back to table. Hands or elbows down. So if your wrists are getting tired, just put your elbows on down. That's fine too. If you don't want to go this low with the elbows, but you want a little more height, you could put your elbows on your blocks as well. Okay. I'm going to offer this because I think for most of us, we're going to feel like our wrists get tired. So elbows are down or hands are down. And you're going to round your back to chin towards chest, spine round, followed by extension. Right, so I don't want you to spend too much energy on either of the sides, but feel the circulation through your back. Chin to chest. Inhale, extending through the waist. Okay, and feel 2 more times, rounding, flexing here, and then extending. So the place we don't want to do as much of the flexing apparently is from sitting, right? Or standing on the feet. So here when we're on all fours, it's a little different motion from the spine when we're flexing the back, right? It's not quite the same pressure and the spinal load on the discs. So we can go with this position, flexing and arching. Okay, now come back to dog pose. I want you to go full inverted V position. Hands can be as far apart as you like. You might even check that out and kind of feel if my hands are shoulder width, if they're a little out, if my fingers turn a little bit out, does that feel better? So I would be exploring that when you lift up your knees. Come back down if you need to and just reset it until you can sense the weight of the feet. Okay? Yeah, you don't have to be searching to get an adjustment type of thing in the back. Just experience the solid structure. If the calves are a little wary and tight, you might lift up the heels, you might bend your knees, you might alternate pumping the legs for a few moments. Okay, but feel the large sensation of that lift of the tailbone. Okay, walk the hands back. And let's take this position with the knees right, so they feel as if you're trying to lean into the knees a little bit here. So I want you to be a little careful that you have more length in the spine, like you're not just dropping and pulling your legs with your hands. I want you to feel like there's some extension out of your spine. Okay, so what will help that is to put your hands on your shins and to kind of feel like you're reaching your chest a little forward. You can't really do a lot of that, right? You can't all of a sudden have your chest facing the space in front of you entirely, because it's just difficult to get the legs stretched. So we're going to bend the knees. I don't have my blocks near me, so I can't use that idea, but feel the legs bending, feel that almost like a standing awkward pose is what this is often called. It's a good awkward position. And when you reach the arms back, so they're back, shoulders motion, push into your feet and then press down and lift up. You can see half of me, I know, but the palms touch overhead and you feel the spine, natural extension, breathing. Okay, so we're not going to sit exactly in chair pose from here or that awkward. I want you to get a feel here and see if you can lift up your heels. I know if it's a little wobbly and you're on a carpet, you do the best that you can. And lower them down, lift them up. It could be just tiny lifts and lower down and bend through the knees, heels down. Stretch the arms open and bring your hands to your hips. And then from this kind of chair shape, you're going to lengthen out of the chest like you're pretending to dive into some water. And then bring the hands forward and walk into an upright push-up position, meaning your hands have to walk you forward, then your feet walk back, and then you have to adjust so your hips aren't popped up. So you're trying to lower, and once you lower down so you feel like you're in as good of an upright pattern, so kind of a plank pose, you get a feel here where your feet reach back through the heels. And notice now when the legs are apart, if I walk the feet closer together, I might be a little bit piped in now, but I want you to get a feel if you can kind of lower down the knees a little bit, not bend them, but lower so you have a little bit more progressive load into your upper body. Because it's more upper body, usually, for a plank pose. All right, bend the knees enough so they lower to the blanket. Stretch back into a cat pose. So knees are close, chin to chest, round the back. Breathe. Inhale, natural arch. Grab the bolster, pull it in. You're going to use this bolster for these posterior back strengtheners. So I would have a blanket. I don't want to run into the wall here. And I want you to have the knees so they're comfortably apart when you lower down, which it might vary for you. You might lower down and then you might move them a little bit out. You might move a little bit in. But kind of feel that the ribs are pressing, but you're breathing now with your elbows on the ground so that there's a little bit of hover sensation. Okay, but the bolster's got you. It's got your back. It's got your back support, even though it's in the front, I know. So feel when the tops of the feet relax and let the spine naturally arch. Okay, and there's nothing wrong if you want to move your chin a little towards your chest to lengthen your neck. Okay, in fact, let's try that. So if your head is like up and you're arching, you want to let your head tilt. So if you were to touch the back of your upper back, your cervical spine, you're going to feel that it's not rounding like this. I'm going to try not to do that. I want to feel like there's some energy strength there, but if my elbows are down, it really should take the load off of making that area tighter. Okay, so slide the hands back, elbows by your sides. Oh, this is big, a big impression on your back that you're doing this, even though it's not as if you're so gleeful to do this, I know, but it's so good for our back. So feel the shoulders. They probably are rolling forward. Try to move them a little bit back, as if you're trying to pack in your shoulders towards your spine. And then you might not even lift very much. You might find that you're sort of stuck here, unless you want to cause some challenge. So feel when you're strengthening your back, and then stretch your arms fully off the ground straight behind you by your sides. So you got kind of, superhero position here. So shoulders trying to move back. And now shoulders, pull back. You got to visualize somebody's got their hands on your shoulders, or maybe you don't like that visualization, but moving back. Then the hands come down and the elbows slide forward, and you feel that Sphinx pose. Then it kind of feels nice. Okay. Now, can you move your eyes forward so that you're stretching a little bit up, and then slide the hands back, elbows push back, and then come into up dog and take the hands out aside as far as you can. You can't go so far you'll splat down, but so that you can integrate the wings of your back, right, to strengthen. So you'll likely feel this in your back a little bit. Breathing is so helpful though. So really intensify the focus on breathing to get circulation and blood flow in these areas. Okay, this is one strong support for our backs. Okay, now we're going to come into a lunge. So you're going to be lunging. So you're going to be moving your toes under, and then push into your hands and slide your knees a little forward. Feel where you're in table position, not flat, right? You don't have to be a flat table, I guess. So that's not table, I guess. Step the right foot to the top right corner of your mat and let the left thigh stretch down on top. If you don't like your knee pushing onto your blanket, I think this one works pretty good for the knee. You can slide the bolster back, and you can use your blocks under your elbows. Yeah, I don't want to keep doing things that are going to make my wrists complaining. So likely you can have more on your forearms than you can on your hands in general. They're just so busy during the day that if we can give them a little bit of a break on occasion in the class, let's do it. So feel where that stretch is now for the inner right thigh. Feel that, and the front of the left thigh. You might feel more on the right thigh for this one. Yeah, we got our right foot pushed out. So my foot, if you can stay in your shape, but my foot it's stepped onto that right side, and it is, you can't see with my bolster in the way. It's turned out, right? It's not forward full parallel. It's a rotated out foot. So then that moves into my inner thigh when I stretch down on my quadricep, which is sort of like I'm trying to somehow lay the bones of the quadricep down, the hip flexor. Okay, take a few more moments here. Yeah, if the knee kind of moves out on the right side, that's okay. If it kind of seems to flow open, just let that be. Breathing. Okay, slide your hands onto your blocks or the floor, toes under, and make the transition very muscular. So I don't want you to focus on flexibility as much as musculability. Okay, so when I move my hips back, it's kind of like a box shape for my right knee moving back. So my knees are together, my left foot steps out, I lean forward, and I'm trying to feel where the muscles engage and then where the flexibility is now in my right thigh. So you might feel like leg work like this is kind of muscle tone. Okay, so it takes time to kind of nab the muscle and then see if you can kind of massage into it with the position. I think this is kind of fun work to do, even though, you know, it's nice to kind of put the time aside for it. Otherwise, it's a little challenging to make time for these practices, but they're good for us. The body appreciates it. So when you feel the front of that right thigh, if it feels like you're too arched in your back or you feel discomfort, you might move your bolster farther back, right? You might decide, well, I'm going to put it a little back. So more of my leg has that bolster. If this version doesn't work for you with the bolster, you can also have the horizontal. Yeah, that's a little smoother. Forgot to say that on the first side, but it might feel better. If I lean down on my blocks on my elbows, this version is better for me. Because then I have my body feels like there's just a little bit more kind of protection. Okay, but I think you could probably do either way. So take a few moments here. We're going to be moving to the wall pretty soon. We need a little wall space today. So get a feel for the front of that leg, and as it lengthens, feel where the arch is through the spine. It's probably small arch if your elbows are down. And then when we come up, you're going to be maintaining focus on the bolster for just a little longer. So when we shift back, if your bolster is spine-wise, if it's straightforward, you're going to turn it across to horizontal, okay? And then walk your left foot in. So if you're using your blocks right now, you want to get a hold of them soon. And then toe, heel, toe, heel. Be a little careful that the toe heel doesn't push to the knee so much when it pivots. It's mostly the isolated ankle and foot. And then when you lean forward into that pigeon pattern, feel the front of that right thigh behind you. I mean, we just did the lunges. So this is just adding into it in some ways. It's just piling on the production here. So feel where the spine is arching. Now it's really clear that the spine is able to arch out of a lunge. And the left foot is probably touching the bolster. Yeah, I wouldn't try to push my left foot farther forward like in the splits. I would just keep it here to bring that weight bearing into my left hip. So we're in a little higher pigeon than we would be in sleeping pigeon today. There's a little reason for it. And it's a short pigeon too. So sink into the left hip, swing the right leg forward, and then you're going to cross it over the left leg. And then as that spine is trying to shoot up out of the pelvis, kind of stacking up in that vertebral column, like there's lift, right? And you want to create that length and the movement of the ribs up. So if my ribs are going up and my spine feels a little bit of arch, right? A little bit of length out of the pelvis. And then you're going to probably need, I think most of us would need a block. I need a block behind me. So place a block behind you, or if you're fine with your blanket or you want to bring your arm around your waist, that's okay. But use something, and again, we're trying to keep it pretty prim and proper. So I don't want you to like be rounding your back to get farther behind you. Focus on the tall aspect of your spinal column, the lift. So even if you're to bring your left arm besides your right leg and you kind of don't turn very far, that's okay. I'd rather have that focus be that lift of the spine. Yeah, I can be a little claustrophobic in the ribs here. So work with the position of the left arm and the rotation. You can always add sand to the left thigh. I'm just trying to simplify our motion, what we have here. Okay, take a moment here where that right hand is touching something, whether it's the blanket. For some of you that you're long armed, it's great. For some, the block is helpful. Okay, then the head turns, kind of wringing out abdominal pressure, massaging the organs. Okay, now as you unwind and come forward, move the block away from behind you. And then take that the right hip was the focus there when we turned, right? It was a little bit of this right leg emphasis. So you'll bring that right foot in front of the left knee and then take the left leg back. Okay, so we're into this pattern for the hip joint. So my left hip has got to stretch behind, and then my weight is in my right hip. Okay. All right, last time I felt like it was a little easier to get my spine lifting. So you could use your blocks. Yeah, just be careful that we're not working on rounding right now. We're not like hunched over and rounding our spine. Right? We're working on lengthening. No slumping. Okay, if the back muscles, right, feel like they're in peak, they may not feel in peak condition, but they feel like they're in peak workout here. You might work on letting the pelvis really center and relax. Really center your hips on the bolster. And now feel where the weight is in that right thigh. Okay, and then, getting your seated pose set up nicely is kind of from the base, kind of the root of your preparation here. So this pose is like to kind of, it doesn't feel like you're at the end of it, but you could leave it and feel like you did it. So that right knee points out, it's probably for some of us, 2 o'clock. That's probably 1 or 2 is where the knee is. And most of us, it's not going to be back at 3. And if I did pull it back to 3, that would start to pull my spine. So I'm going to try to keep it so my spine is just kind of jazzed about it. Things are moving, flowing. So my weight is in my right thigh. And then I stretch the weight into my left thigh back, and I'm going to help bring that forward and cross it over the right leg. Okay, so this sacrum area is stable. And I feel like you're in elementary yoga again. Okay, right elbow to left leg, twist the left hand is on something. Maybe a blanket, maybe a block. It's your second side. You might go, oh my goodness, it's a little different on this side. I twist easier, or maybe you're just differences. So noticing those things perhaps, and then feel what part of your body is the same, like your muscle in the upper body could be able to muscle your way to the twist the same as the last side. So take that breath on. You're probably feeling the breath pretty much the same intensity on the second side. And aim for lift out of the waist. So almost seeing if you can kind of expand that position of lifting the heart. And then just that rotation through the waistline. You can turn your head. You could let your eyes close, is always helpful. Internalize. You know, my hope is you feel something in that right arm. I mean, I hope it's not like something bad, but you feel like it's not necessarily flexibility, but it's some, the pores are kind of open to that strength. So think of it, that moving into your muscles, right? That strength, that pressure, that resistance. Okay, so we unwind. And I want you to, you know, if you need to do anything else sitting onto this bolster before we go to the wall, go for it. So maybe you need to uncross and shake out the legs for a few seconds, go for that, but try to keep that spine up versus slumping, right? And then scoot off of your bolster and come to your wall space. Let's give ourselves a minute or so everyone can find their next supported area. So we want a wall, we want a blanket behind you, and you want your bolster. Your block is probably enough, just one. Actually bring two, because you might like the second one for something. And have a belt this time at the wall. I'm on the fence about it, but I think we might be using it. So we lower down, so we're getting ready to have our back centered on your mat, as much as you think it is in the middle of your mat, and your feet onto the wall. And when that feet come up, can you experience where the tailbone, I mean, I feel somewhere between sacrum and tailbone, probably more sacrum. So it's like the low back basin, kind of pelvis centered on the ground, back of the pelvis. Okay, and your daily experience with the pelvis is it's kind of hanging down from the spine, right? This is like giving it some strength work. So you're pushing into it's not, gravity doesn't have you on this one, like it does when you're standing. Everything goes down. So now we're trying to go against it. So you're pushing into the wall, and if you have a block or a ball, place it between the knees, and make sure it's the knees versus thighs, because that's not going to be quite the same for the hip. So if I'm squeezing into the object between my knees, whether it's a block or a ball, when I push in, then it correlates right into my, I don't really feel it that deep in my hip, but I can feel that when my knees squeeze in and I kind of ooze into my back, like try to let it center on the ground, it helps that back space, right at the back of the pelvis, or the pelvis pack, kind of just release open. Doesn't bring it in tighter, right? So I squeeze in to open up that base. So make sure that if you use a blanket, it's very small height. It's not bunched up very high, or go with none. Okay, either, whatever's comfortable. So push into the wall, and then as you lift up your hips, okay, and you work your way to lifting, you're climbing up to your shoulders here. That's what you study, this kind of position to get in the shoulder stand. And then let the spine lower down. Okay, but we're supported right now. We're not jamming our neck. So the hands could be on the ground, straight down. They could be a little bit open at the elbows, but I would recommend them being pretty straight down towards your fingers. And then as you lift up your hips and you alternate, you just the lift and lower of the spine. So feel where your feet are at the wall. If you need to slide down, if you need to slide your body closer, which I do because it feels like I have a better stretch through my spine, the higher up my feet go at the wall. Right? If I'm closer to the wall, I can feel my feet really supported by it. Okay, so take a few spinal massage, lifting and lowering the hips. And try to keep the arms down. I know it's tempting to go back with the arms overhead, but for right now, let's try to keep that strength pack into the back muscles. Not that it would take it all away, but just for this exercise. So next time you come down, you're going to move your knees into your chest, and I want you to try to move them in. They might not touch your chest, but your awareness as they go in and in and in. Yeah, that doesn't naturally happen unless you squeeze them. So feel when the knees draw in towards the chest. And then you'll move the ball, and now we're going to need our blocks, or block, whichever you're going to use, one or two. So if you're going to use two, I would just have them set up just in case next to your lower leg span, so you can easily touch them. So now lower down, actually bring your feet to the wall. Let's start with the feet. And then we're going to lift up the hips. Feet are at the wall, that's key. And then you're going to place a block. And if you're feeling like your spine is a little cranky right now, you might start with a block at the mid-height. And then you could have two. You could have them side by side, or you could have it across underneath your back of your pelvis. Okay? I'm just going to put them side by side. They don't go up to my thoracic. They're just under the back of the pelvis and the lumbar. And then I lower my feet down right against the wall. There you go. Now I know some of you, it looks good. Some of you will have your block all the way up. So you could try that. If this feels, it's kind of easy. What I want is more of this hip flexor stretch. Then your option would be come back up to the wall with your feet. Give it a try. You don't have to though. If it feels like that was plenty, stay there and marinate. Let the arms be down and open, the shoulders. But if you're going to try that higher height, and it's not going to cause a jamming of the back, but you might find you have to be pretty close to the wall with your feet, knees, lifting your feet. And then as you lift up your hips, just be careful that when that block goes at that high height, some teach this one where I took a session last weekend where we had our feet on a chair, and then we did this where we had a block that was flat, and then they took a block that was the highest height above the flat block and tipped it into the spine. And I was a little concerned about, I don't know how scientifically good that would have been for a vertebrae, but I'm still kind of at this base level, and I'll probably just remain here. This to me is enough. So lower the feet down and feel, this feels a little better in my hip flexor. I feel a little bit more opening. Now the feet don't have to stay at the wall. You could move them a little in towards your, away from the wall towards your buttocks, towards that realm. And that's a pretty nice sensation. Maybe moving my blanket away. Remember, we don't want to be causing more neck flexion. That's just never a good idea. So this might feel a little bit kind of naked at your neck, naked neck. But when you roll your shoulders under it, it sort of fills the gap of sensation. This might be your almost most advanced moment today. Okay, even if you have two blocks, we're going to call it advanced moment. Okay, let the spine settle for a few more moments. I mean, you're an advanced body practitioner. You've been in your body a while. Okay, so get a feel. Now, if your feet are at the wall, that's fine. In fact, you could even have them up on the wall on this. You could, if your block is really steady, or your blocks, you could have your legs up in the air. You just got to be sure your block is not rocking around. Okay. So that is like spine freedom for me. I do like the hip flexor option. We know we'll go legs up the wall at the end, so you can play around with it if you're feeling playful. Yeah, and if I slowly lift up, then I have this nice kind of core challenge for the lower abdomen. And you may be getting to the stage where these legs up positions are becoming comfortable for your spine. It's the opposite direction of the spine. All day long, it's going this direction downhill. So now it's against gravity. It's just good spine stuff. Spine stuff. Okay, let's come down. Let's bring our feet to the wall and lift up the hips and slide the block away. Okay? And once the spine lowers down, I want you to slide back. You don't need your blocks. Slide back so that your feet touch the wall, the bottoms of the feet. So you gotta scoot back, and then your feet touch the wall, base of the wall. Okay, so you're all the way to the base. You've got a bolster somewhere. I know you're gonna need it in a few moments. So if you need to move that around so it's on the right side of your body, then you might have to get up and move that and then come back to meet in this shape with your feet at the wall. Okay, now push real firm into the wall. If you want to scoot down again and then push again, so you feel like there's some resistance from the wall. Okay, arms are down by the sides, the palms are towards the side, so they're facing in, right? So your shoulders are impressed with you. And then let the left knee draw in. I want you to bring that leg in. We're not going to use the belt, but this will be minimal, so we won't overdo it. But get a feel of moving that leg in towards your chest. We just did a back bend, so I want you to release the spine. Okay, the right foot's going to turn out a little bit to the right side and then cross the left leg over to a bolster near you. Okay, have some caution here. Use a ball to the sacrum area. You don't have to use it, but if you have one, use it. And then if you need a pile of blankets underneath your knee or one blanket, if you don't have one nearby, you can maybe use a block under your knee, okay? And if you don't use any props there, that's fine. And then add a sandbag to the outer left leg. Now think of this as an important practice for the circulation through the hip, okay? Open the chest just to your degree of enlightenment here in the upper zone. And then let your head maybe roll to the left. You can roll your head, but have it on a blanket. And feel that essential round of breath. And now feel where that weight is into the right hip. I know you might notice your left hip stretching, but feel the base touch down. Breathe through the nose. And then let your head go back to center. Move the sand. And then have a moment when you take the ball out and you bring the knees to poke up towards the ceiling. That's important. Knees poke up. Let the left leg lengthen down to push into the wall. And then bring your right knee in towards your chest. You can hold the back of the leg if you're concerned about crushing the knee. It's probably an intelligent choice in general for the knee's lifespan. And then push into your left foot. Push to make length. So you get a feel for that left side of the spine. Just because the foot's pushing into the wall. You know, release that pressure of holding. And then if you have your bolster on that side, you haven't moved it, move it to the left. And then take care that you're coordinating your body to cross the right leg to the bolster. So you're rolling on the back of the pelvis. And then add your sand and maybe the ball to the sacrum, but the sand to the leg. It's not required. You might actually be more interested in having a blanket on top of your bolster and then having a little more ease to get your knee over there. But some of it, probably a little 50-50 on this one. So you might play with where the direction of the chest opens to the right and expanding. I mean, my ball fell out, so must not want to stay, but we'll see if I can get it to comfort. If it doesn't feel good, then just don't use it, right? Not going to be helpful. But usually eventually finds us stopping. And then rolling your chest muscles to the right. Counter spin the chest. And left arm could be maybe gently touching onto that sandbag. Could be connected to your ribs to breathe. Right? It's like you have a measuring device here just with your hand to your breathing. And appreciate the circulation through the spine. It does a lot. Okay, now when you slide the ball and the sand away, you're going to keep rolling to that left side. And I would take the body weight into the arms and then slide it down to the hips and then try to keep that as your progression to going upside down. So I know we got to move our prop and we get our bolster to the wall. That's really helpful. And we got our blanket. As you center, you've got your seat. Now I know you got to get your arm to help you cross up to the swing of the leg. So I've got my sand nearby. I'm gonna sit on one side of my bolster. And then when I lower my arms down, then I can roll my bottom up. That sounds kind of funny, huh? Things sound funny. Words in their relationship sounds funny. That's part of it, the human game, maybe. Okay. I don't think if my cat could talk that he would want to anyway. The only language is purring and meowing. Okay, so let the legs lift up with some sand on them, and then get a feel where that, sometimes it's nice to just accept if you're a little bit away from the wall. And, I've seen teachings where it's to have the thighs away purposely. So, having this idea, I don't know what teaching that came from, a sitting bone to the wall, but it did come out somewhere. So feel what is working for you. And I think it's feeling that's important. So my back ribs are lightly floating up because of the bolster under my pelvis. A little bit, they're not jammed on the ground. And then you might give yourself a hug and try to stretch the blades a tiny bit so there's some separation. And then the arms flow back. They could flow back, could just completely, however they lie down. They could be open to the sides, to cactus. And you might let them rest a little farther down. But as the mind goes back inwards, as it does over and over in the experience, take a final pose here, really integrating, returning the body to a state of upside downness, which could equal balance, and integration, massaging the diaphragm. So even though you're moving the belly with the breath, The diaphragm has this nice gliding angle. Yeah, usually, during the day it drops to gravity and loses some of its tone. So we're working on that tone of the organs by lifting the pelvis up and breathing slowly. Nice and simple. Make sure your head feels comfy. Some of us, it's a little more of moving the chin. And some of us are comfortable moving it up. It's like the cat-cow motion of the neck. Now move the feet away from the wall, just a tiny bit, so that you can work on flexing the feet, so feeling that's an okay thing to do. Right, the calves. And bend your knees and remove the sand, but bring the legs back up the wall, knees up for a moment, and feel them very close. So they're close as they can be. And then feel them a little bit apart, maybe a hip's distance. Notice how that feels in your back. It might be more intense when the feet are apart. It makes sense it would, when it narrows the SI area. And if they keep going out, they'll keep narrowing. So bring them close. And then it's not a real jump because you don't have sand on them, but you're lifting the feet up and then you're moving them away from the wall. And just kind of visualize that they keep going up, 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 even though I know you're not levitating, but you want to keep the feeling of that lift of the feet. It could be heels. For most of us, it's probably closer to the ball of the foot because the heels don't really present on helping you flow up, right? Even when you're standing. It's more the ball of the foot if you lift up your heels. Okay? And then bending through, and then feel when the spine elongates just by bending your legs. Yeah, perfect way to stretch the spine without doing anything harmful to the spinal column at all as it matures. So as you roll to the side, you're going to use your arms to push and then bring yourself to sit, hopefully at the wall if you don't mind, because it's good for our spinal curvature. So a nice healthy spine dangling off from the brainstem is going to have its curves. It's 3 different stages, or 3 different chambers. So get a feel of that column, the chambers, the column, whatever you want to call it. And let the shoulders move back. And then feel maybe your head moves back. And breathing slow. Let the abdomen relax. See if you can be comfortable with that softening core. Nice. And then bring the hands so that they're either in your lap, palms open. And then feel when the arch of the spine is responding. You'll lift your hands up, perhaps for some of us, together in front of the heart. Inhaling and exhaling, bowing into your heart.